Hello, Gary here, and welcome to another episode of Lost Treasure Stories. If you're new to this channel and you like Lost Treasure Stories, be sure to check out our channel playlist for more stories just like this one. We upload a new Lost Treasure story every week, so be sure to hit the subscribe button down there so you don't miss any. I have hundreds and hundreds of Lost Treasure stories on file from my 45 years of research. So if you leave me a comment below with the city and state that you live in, I'll post a lost treasure story just for you as close to your location as possible as a welcome gift from me to you. And you can do me a favor too by hitting that thumbs up button down below to like this lost treasure story. As a quick reminder, there is a great lost treasure found story at the end of this video. So hang around, guys and girls.
Here are 3 different newspaper articles about this New Mexico lost treasure story. We're going to cover all 3 articles because they all give somewhat conflicting statements. One thing is for sure though, this story is true. Although a portion of this treasure was recovered at that time, much of it was not recovered. All 3 articles are dated August 6, 1910. This first article is from the Laramie Republican out of Laramie, Wyoming, and goes like this. Captain Ford of the Mounted Police was notified today that the stage from Mogollon, Socorro County, to Silver City was again held up, the driver killed and $20,000 in silver bullion stolen. The stage was previously held up last week and 3 women passengers were relieved of $650. Several posses today took up the trail of the robbers. A dispatch from Mogollon this noon says that 4 of the 8 bars of the bullion have been recovered. Mountain Police, Beale and Wright, wire that they are on the trail of the robbers. This next article appeared in the Newcastle News out of Newcastle, Pennsylvania, and reads, 2 masked bandits today held up the Mogollon Mountain stage a mile from Camp Mogollon, shot and killed the driver Joseph Dominguez, and fled with gold and silver bullion valued at $18,000. Later the robbers threw a number of silver bars into a nearby house and escaped into the mountains with the gold. Posses are pursuing. And the final article on this lost treasure story is from the Spanish American out of Santa Fe, New Mexico, and it stated, Captain Ford of the Mounted Police was notified today that the stage from Mogollon, Socorro County, to Silver City was again held up, the driver killed and $20,000 in silver bullion stolen. The stage was held up last week and 3 women passengers were relieved of $650. Several posses today took up the trail of the robbers. A dispatch from Mogollon this noon says that 4 of the 8 bars of the bullion have been recovered. Mountain Police, Beale and Wright, wire that they are on the trail of the robbers. According to later reports, the robbers secured 12 bars of gold, valued at $18,000. No passengers were on the stage. The gold belonged to the Ernestine Mining Company and the Socorro Mining Company. A dispatch says that 4 of the 8 bars of the bullion have been recovered. The Mountain Police and Sheriff Wright wired that they are on the trail of the robbers. A further report from Mogollon says that the driver, Jose Dominguez, was shot dead and thrown out into the road by the bandits, who then drove off the stage and robbed it. When the stage was 2.5 hours overdue at Glenwood, the driver, Jake Rouse, who was to relieve Dominguez, started out to meet him and found his body on the road. The male Sachs had not been molested.
And now we're going to get into the story of James Griffin's lost gold hoard that he buried on his farm in Indiana.
This lost treasure story appeared in a newspaper article in the summer of 1904. This is the article. Search for a hidden treasure on the farm of the late James Griffin by unknown persons has resulted in the searchers not only making large excavations on the farm, but in desecrating the family graveyard in their hunt for gold. James Griffin is said to have been an eccentric man. He came to Indiana when this part of the state was swarming with Indians. He acquired 3,200 acres of land along the Mississippi River and Walnut Creek. The gold was buried by Griffin near his home, at a point where Walnut Creek empties into the river. Before his death he failed to tell any of his relatives where he had buried the gold, and for 30 years unknown persons have worked at night at intervals of 6 to 18 months in making excavations on the farm. It is not known that any part of the treasure has ever been found, and the fact that parties continue to search is proof that all of it has not been found. Benjamin Franklin Griffin, a grandson of James Griffin, now occupies the old homestead. James Griffin Jr., a son of the early settler, lives on a part of the original tract. A number of the grandchildren are living in this county, and are solid influential citizens. The members of the family who occupied this land say they do not know the persons who have been searching for the treasure. Previous to his death he gave each of his children and grandchildren 160 acres of land and $500 in gold. The remainder of his land and property he sold, converted into golden eagles, half-eagles, and other gold coins.
Okay, this next story has everything you want in a lost treasure story. It has a murder, mystery, and buried gold. Let's take a look.
This lost treasure story appeared in a Kokomo, Indiana newspaper article June 21, 1895. The article reads, "Last winter Mr. Overman, a farmer near Windfall, Tipton County, was found dead with a pistol near him. No cause for suicide was assigned. Yesterday a paper written by Mr. Overman was found in his effects that explain the mystery. Overman's letter says that 20 years ago an Englishman came to his house with $30,000 and tried to negotiate him to go into the ranch business in Colorado. He murdered the Englishman, buried his body in a marsh, took his money, and buried it on his farm. The place is not designated. This explains the hermit-like life of Overman for these many years."
Okay, the next story is about Anna Klotz in Minnesota. Anna had a habit of saving every gold coin she could. She didn't like checks, she didn't like cash, she only dealt in gold. She ended up building up a whole lot of old gold coins, and her other habit was to bury them on her farm.
With Thanksgiving almost here, the following is a special Thanksgiving lost treasure story that appeared in a newspaper article from Thanksgiving 1890. Here's the story as it read. Wealth and happiness do not always go hand in hand, and the case of Mrs. Anna Klotz, who died yesterday at the city hospital, serves well as an example that those sole aim in life is hoarding of gold are not to be envied by their perhaps more fortunate brethren who have just sufficient with which to buy the necessities of life. Last Thursday Anna Klotz, an old woman of 60 years, was knocked down by an electric car on 5th Street. The old woman received every attention at the hands of Dr. Anker and his staff of able assistants. The woman, however, never rallied, and yesterday as her dim light faded, her spirit passed away to her Maker. Her story is a strange one, as investigations made last evening proved. When conveyed to the hospital the woman was unconscious and unable to tell who she was, or where her relatives lived. In her pockets were found letters, deeds, and receipts of the value of $35,000, which were taken possession of by Dr. Anker, but nothing gave a clue as to where she lived. Her name was Anna Klotz, that was all known about her. That she had loving relatives, why did they not report to the police that she was missing? The fact that she was in the hospital would very quickly have been made known to them. But neither kith nor kin called or made any inquiries at police headquarters or at the hospital. The only thing that the woman loved was her gold, and it could not love her in return. Art T. O'Connor, the re-elected clerk of court, who heard of the woman's death last evening, stated that she had some 2 years ago come to his office on business, but beyond that he knew little of her, except that she owned property on Jackson Street between 7th and 8th. Inquiries were made there by a Globe reporter, who succeeded in gaining some important information from one of the dead woman's tenants. Charles Rose, of 441 Jackson Street, a saloon proprietor, said that he rented the 3-story house from the old lady. Her husband was Frederick Klotz, who owned 40 acres of land near Fort Snelling. The old woman owned the house on Jackson Street, and appears to have told Mr. Rose a great deal of her affairs. He said that she owned a great deal of property all over the city but insisted upon collecting her rents in person. She could neither read or write, and would never accept a check in payment of rents. She insisted always on being paid in gold, and carefully counted and examined each piece of money before finally putting it in her satchel. Whether she deposited her money in a bank or not, Mr. Rose did not know, though at one time J. H. Shermer, Herman Shepard, and W. H. Ham had collected her rent. This was some years ago, when she lived with her husband on the outskirts of Minneapolis. During the last 4 years she has always collected her rents in person, and it is believed that she buried a quantity of gold on the farm at Fort Snelling. She often declared that banks and checks were not safe, and on no account would she take paper money. Some time ago her desire for accumulating wealth became her one aim in life, and she actually secured a divorce from her husband on the ground of non-support. She told Mr. Rose that she had a son who had been confined in the asylum at St. Peter, but that she would not support him, and he had gone to California to live with her 2 nieces. The day she was knocked down she had previously been in the saloon, where she complained she had lost her pocketbook with the contents, $12, and bewailed that bitterly. The building on Jackson Street is worth $25,000 to $30,000 and was purchased some years ago by the woman for $7,500. She had accumulated money by speculation in city lots. Though divorced from her husband, she lived on the farm at Fort Snelling in a small house. Her body lies at Murphy and Donnelly's undertaking establishment, and her husband will be informed today of her death, and his decision as to the burial task. As a side note to this newspaper article, if you couldn't already guess by the spelling of her name, Anna Klotz was of German descent. There was a very large population of German immigrants who lived throughout Minnesota and Wisconsin. A very large percentage of them buried their money because they did not trust banks. Also, most of them preferred dealing in gold coins only. So as you can see, it wouldn't have been unusual at all for Anna to bury gold coins on her farm.
Okay, and now that brings us to the last story in this week's episode. And as usual, this is a Lost Treasure Found story about several tin cans full of old gold coins buried on a farm in Illinois.
This Lost Treasure Found story is from a newspaper article from the early 1900s. The article is out of Illinois. The mystery of what became of Tobias Oken's hoard, which has been the subject of speculation and the object of search in the upper part of Madison County for 10 years, has been solved. Gold and treasure which he was believed to have buried on the old Oken homestead, a mile north of Bethalto, Illinois, has been found. The hiding place was revealed by Miss Annie Oken, daughter of Tobias, on her deathbed. 5 tin cans filled with shining $5, $10, and $20 gold pieces, aggregating $16,000, have been found in an old trunk in the garret of the homestead. Tobias Oken was spoken of as a miser. He always converted other money into gold and was never known to part with any of his gold. When he died and it was found that he had not made any disposition of the gold, which was believed to be a large amount, conclusion was reached that he had buried it on the farm. At intervals ever since attempts have been made to unearth it. After the death of the old man, his daughter Annie lived alone at the homestead. She was as close as her father had been. When she was taken sick and was told that she could not live, she called her brother, Tobias Jr., to her bedside, and told him that her father had told her on his deathbed where his money was hidden in an old trunk in the garret, and had given it to her. She had found $10,000 in gold and tin cans and had added $8,000 to it in the 10 years that had passed. The garret was searched and the money was found. The gold pieces in each container were covered with a layer of dirt which gave them the appearance of having been used as flower pots.